So rethink this for a moment as we're rethinking the conclusion of Alex Shakar's Savage Girl. Imagine that you go and you buy a new dress, and you go and you stand in front of your best friend and you say, "How do I look? Do I look good?" And the friend says, "You look great." How do you read that appraisal of your choice of dress? Or what's the difference perhaps maybe in the intention of how you wear a dress that's ugly? Is it an ugly dress or a post-ironic costume in the end? This is kind of one of those questions that's at the heart of the Savage Girl. How does irony impact a culture, and in what ways does it kind of impact the ways in which we interact and understand the world around us? Another act of imagining here is to kind of rethink the presidential press conference, as a means of communication. A reporter asks the question, "Mr. President, how is the economy?" And the president says, "The economy is sound." Now, how do you read that word "sound" in the end? If the president says that the economy is okay, or the economy is doing better, then it creates all kinds of levels of questioning that might impact the economy in some ways. So the president, even if the economy isn't sound, has to answer that it's sound. Would you call this a lie? Would you call this, a bending of the truth? Would you call this a manipulation of the truth? Would you call this something else in the end? And that's one of those things that Shakar's novel is getting at, is, in what ways do marketers, manipulate the truth of the world, to present products. Harry Frankfurt, Princeton philosopher, in his great book from 2005 called On Bullshit, thinks about this. In what ways does language and speaking and rhetoric cultivate human honesty, and what ways does it also perhaps cultivate human doubt? And Frankfurt crafts a separate category of rhetoric here, a separate category of writing or speaking that he labels bullshit, which is, as he says, a greater enemy of the truth than lies are. Because if you're speaking to a liar has no attachment to the truth. Therefore, you can understand that what you're receiving is a lie. But the bullshitter, for Frankfurt, is more dangerous, because the bullshitter has no attachment to the truth whatsoever. So you could be being fed the truth, you could be being fed the absolute lie you don't know in the end. And so this kind of gets at the heart of of the levels of intention and communication that go on in Shakar's novel, The Savage Girl. How do you understand a writer's impact in a time where truth seems malleable, or a time where things are changing? As Chaz will say on page 140, our culture's become so saturated with ironic doubt that it's beginning to doubt its own mode of doubting. When somebody tells you look great in that new dress or in that new suit, how do you read that great? When the president says the economy is sound, how do you read that sense of sound? In what ways are you being manipulated by language? And that's the question of the Imagineers here. How is language manipulated? How is the image manipulated in an era that you can call it postmodern, or you can call it an era of late capitalism, or a post-human era? For Shakar, how is it a new age of savagery in this novel? Chaz defines it as the light age, spelled L-I-T-E. In his presentation, he says, this is on pages 140, 141, by post-ironic, I don't mean earnest. Innocence lost cannot be reclaimed so simply. This is more than a simple backlash. Practitioners of post-ironic consciousness blur the boundaries between irony and earnestness. Post-irony seeks not to mystify, but to befuddle. Through consumption, consumers will be gods. Outside of consumption, they will be nothing. A perpetual oscillation between absolute control and absolute vulnerability, between grandeur and persecution. Post-irony is giddy terror. Post-irony in its purest paradescence is schizophrenia. So you're in this situation in this world where you have all these opportunities, to buy and to make choices in this economy, but how much power do you really have in the end? And how much are you manipulated by the narratives that surround products, that surround consumption itself, that surround production, that surround the kind of interactions that go on a daily basis within the economy. Chaz is getting at this in some levels, right? This seems really important in terms of Shekar's novel because it's written in those moments leading up to 9/11 and post 9/11. People started talking about how we were going to become more earnest now in this moment, and we were become more truthful with ourselves, and we were going to cultivate more genuine interactions following the traumas there. And the question is, has that really happened in this world? Chaz sees the world of savagery also underneath this post-ironic world. And in Blackout, the chapter on pages 124, 125, he tells Ursula, Ivy is the future. She's everything I'm predicting. Tribalism, virtualism, post-irony, the whole new era to come. And if I'm right, everybody wins. I win, Ivy wins, and you win too, Ursula. You win big. The savage look is your baby. You and your sister, both, the two of you, rich, powerful, invincible. Think of it, you and Ivy, queens of the urban jungle, killing and eating and playing, noble and beautiful and strong. No more fear, no more failure, no more rules. Nothing can touch you. You can roar like a goddamned lion. In what ways is Chaz bullshitting Ursula here? And in what ways is Ursula also kind of, bullshitting herself, deceiving herself in the end about who she is and the powers that she commands as an Imagineer, as a trend spotter, as a marketer in the end? Versus Chaz's versions of the Light Age, we have critiques of that, and one of them posed by Javier as he begins to see Chaz's vision unfold is that he sees on pages 166, 167, as he tells Ursula, post-irony is a conspiracy against the children. We're eating our young, we're starving them of love, so they'll buy more of what we sell them. They think they're buying love, but it isn't love. We're eating our young, and they know it. That's the most terrible thing. They know it. And so Javier starts to see the ways in which marketing itself, has kind of ramped up within the internet, within a new age of earnestness, a new age of post-irony, and he begins to question, his own place within that world. This is the sense of the Light Age is also critiqued in images that Ursula gathers as the novel unfolds to its end. She sees Ivy burning money on the internet. She sees her sister hurting and coming apart, and how that's reflected in that act. She sees the savage girl in the park butchering a slaughtered dog, and she has a new sense of that, of what that savagery entails. And she also has this image, in the Amazon at the end of the novel. She's anticipating a day when humanity is filled with enough love and imagination and responsibility to become its own God and make a paradise of its world. So how do you read Ursula's vision at the end of the novel? How much irony is that vision tinged with? Is that a possibility, or is she just deluding herself once again? It's an important point within this novel. This also can lead us, in the end, to kind of start to think about fiction itself as a means of telling the truth. And, is fiction itself, as made-up story, is it a lie, or does it get at truths that you can't get at through journalism or through other kinds of writing? So how do you think here about Shekar's novel as another means of telling the truth? It's a fiction that's about marketing, so it's a fiction about fictions in the end. How do you read the levels of irony that are engaged within that? So you can take a look at that conversation on pages 186 and following, where the Imagineers are talking, and they get to try to one-up each other, double your consumption with potential with irony, and they start to think about irony itself as a product. How does fiction work versus rhetoric or speech making as a means of presenting the truth? In what ways is rhetoric by presenting an argument and building support for that argument? In what ways does rhetoric also start to perhaps bend the truth to make its point and to argue its point. You can also care about fiction versus nonfiction writing. Think about Shakar's world that develops in The Savage Girl, which is outlandish and seems make-believe and is definitely fictional. But how does that world explain our human situation in ways that nonfiction can't? So you could think about comparisons here between that world and Valeria Luiselli's Tell Me How It Ends, or if you've ever read Roberto Bolaño's great novel 2666, which is also about the border and violence along the border. In what ways does that fictional presentation of a non-fictional world, a non-fictional situation, in what ways does the line between fiction and nonfiction kind of being blurred, in what ways does that get at the truth as well?